Welcome, everyone. It is July 11th, 2025. It is yours truly, David Morgan of themorganreport.com. And today I have Patrick Wood with me. Patrick and I have got a pretty long history. I moved up to the Great Northwest over 25 years ago, and I think I'd only been here for a couple of years. And Pat reached out and said, "Hey, we have a lot in common. Have a cup of coffee with me." And we've been friends ever since. I will speak for you, Pat, and you can correct me. Vaguely remember we were kind of on the honest money path for a while, and then you kind of broke off and did something equally or perhaps more important. That's in the viewer's domain, but you started on something that many people really are confused about, and that's technocracy. And there's so much that we're going to delve in today, but I mean, it relates to transhumanism, AI, uh, power and control, which is one of the subtopics of what I do. Welcome aboard. Give us a brief background, and I'm going to hit you hard on what you've done in the past and what you've just come out with. So, Pat,
You
thanks.
know, I have to confess, you know this, I think. I was one of the original hard money guys starting in 1973. And I was in that arena for so many years. I absolutely loved the work that I did. But when I discovered historic technocracy, I basically had to leave it all behind and chase after this fox because the story was too big to ignore. So you had to carry on with your work in silver. I had other friends that carried on with gold, and I had to wave goodbye at that point.
You did, and I'm glad you did, because you've really, I would put it in the context of put another major puzzle piece into the puzzle of the conundrum we all face on, in my strong opinion, we are spiritual beings in a physical world.
Yes.
Yet we've got to strive to make a living. As my friend Foster Gamble says, we're the only species on the planet that has to make a living. Every other animal more or less thrives. Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far. I'm going to start you right off, Pat, for some context and relevance to what we're going to do today. And that is, in your research, technocracy traces back to the 1930s idea of a centralized energy-based economy. How do you weave that into the historical origin and the narrative for the modern viewer?
It never changed. The basic tenets of technocracy never changed in almost 100 years. It's changed names along the way. That you would expect that the marketers would figure out how to change the name to confuse everybody what they're dealing with, right? Because it started out the technocracy, then it became the New International Economic Order with the Trilateral Commission, then it became Agenda 21 with the United Nations, then Agenda 2030. Today we have smart growth, sustainable development. This is all warmed over technocracy from the 1930s. It was predicated on control over resources, number one, and also over energy. We see energy now is such a critical issue. It's been critical for a long time, but right now with all of these AI data centers being established all around the country, especially our country, everybody's wondering, is there going to be enough energy to go around for the rest of us? See, this is all about control. Same thing with resources. We see resources being gobbled up all over the world, but especially in our country. People are complaining in Phoenix. I'm sure you see the same thing up there, but in Phoenix, people are complaining they can't find a house. There's no houses. There's houses on the market, but they can't find anything that they can afford. And all the available houses in our area have been bought up by the likes of BlackRock, for instance, State Street, for instance, these huge hedge funds that came in and just took whole communities over. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Technocracy has changed names over the years, but it's still technocracy. It was invented at Columbia University as a resource-based economic system. This is the first economic system in the history of the world that's been created from scratch. Period. End of subject. I studied it. You know, I studied this for years with Professor Anthony Sutton. There's never been another economic system in the world other than technocracy. This is what we're dealing with today. And I have to say it's kind of branched, it's matured, it's populated, for instance, now with AI. That's a huge tool for the technocrats to use to capture our country and the world. There you go.
I think it's important because some of my viewers are not going to be familiar with you and your work and our relationship. And, you know, one thing I think to point out is not only when it started, but the fact that Elon Musk's grandfather was the head of Technocracy in Canada. And and I'm going to add on to that with like the AI, and I've written about that, where the way I see it going, basically piggybacking what you've taught me, is that we're going to get to a point possibly where the AI is going to be your judge and jury. You know, you get a traffic infraction and the AI will be there at the roadside, and, you know, they'll take your identification and say, okay, your fine is such and such. We just debited out of your account. Have a nice day. You'll just bypass the rest of the system where you go in and appear or choose to appear or summons the cop or whatever the heck it is. And that won't just be for a traffic ticket. That will be for getting your DMV license. You'll go to a kiosk. It'll take your photo and say, oh, yes, Patrick Wood, we know that you, and by the way, how'd you like your last Amazon purchase? And, you know, I don't want to talk too much, but am I off on this?
No, not at all. This is what happened in China. China was a technocracy from the get-go because when China was inducted onto the world stage by Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1979 to 76 to 79, he brought them on as a failed economic system, and he didn't teach them free market economics or capitalism. He taught them technocracy. And the rest of history, the people still call they call them the Chi-Coms, the Chinese Communist Party, et cetera. Well, I got news for everybody. That was not the case, at least by 1999, the year 2000, where China was identified, even by Time magazine, of all places, as being a technocracy. They were run by engineers and scientists, and for the purpose of engineering an economic system. It was not capitalism. Excuse me. It wasn't capitalism. It wasn't communism either. So this has matured over there, and they have their social credit scoring system based on AI and cameras to identify everybody on the street. They can monitor everything you do multiple times a day. And you're right. If you get a ticket or you cross the street wrong, you have the ticket will be applied to your account immediately. Your picture will go up on a public billboard and shame. And by the time you get home, you'll find your bank account has been debited the fine.
Yeah.
And there's no appeal. There's no appeal at all at that point. So this is exactly what we see coming at us today in every facet of society and every possible element of the human domain, whether it's medicine, healthcare, politics, economics, you name it.
Well, I want to go a little further on because a lot of, in fact, one that I think a podcaster pretty renowned at this point in time, David Nino Rodriguez. He's ex-boxer. He does a great podcast, lots of followers. And I'm not going to call him out. It might sound that way, but he and many others, you know, they keep using communism. In fact, on my last show with on X, with one of the more notables there. And we're not talking about communism. We're talking about technocracy. There is a difference. And this resource-based economy, so it's a two-part question again, is, well, what's wrong with the resource-based economy, Pat? And we have X amount of resources on the planet, and we figure out what they are, and then we base the economy based on that with green technology, sustainable development, and everybody lives in harmony. What the heck could be wrong with that? So take it away, please.
Oh, well. Klaus Schwab said a few years ago, before he stepped down from the WEF, World Economic Forum, he said, by 2030, you will own nothing and be happy. Forget being happy just for a minute, okay? That's an oxymoron. But he said, you'll own nothing by 2030. What does that mean? That means private property is on the chopping block right now. Totally. And if you think that's just a saying, they really mean it. They want all property to be stripped from you and me and everybody else in society, where you can't own a business, where you can't own real estate, where you can't own property out in the boondocks or whatever, even a car. They want to get rid of your cars as well. But they're converting the world into a pay-per-view economy where all the resources are in their hands, and then you pay to use your portion that they choose you to give to you. You need a car? Well, you can rent one, or take Uber, or take a train, or whatever. You need clothing for a ball or whatever. Well, you rent a suit from somebody, and when you're done with it, you're going to turn it in. It's a pay-per-view world at that point, right? That means all the resources are basically controlled by the, whatever you want to call it, the global cabal or the global common trust. It doesn't matter. But the ones who are able to access that resource pool to make products for you to consume, they'll decide what you get, and they'll decide what you are able to pay for as well. So this is crazy. But let me just answer this back to 1932. In that day, they totally negated the idea of private property even back then. They said nobody's going to own private property. That's anathema to the technocratic system. And they said that they'll give you energy credits to spend on goods and services based on how much energy that went into those goods and services to make them in the first place. And you'd have an allocation of energy credits for your spending in the period, like a month or a quarter. The estimated amount of energy would be divided by the population, and everybody would have their energy credits. This was highly defined. They said, when the period is over, all of your energy credits expire. If you have some left over, you didn't have any ability to spend them after that day. If you ran out along the way, well, that's tough luck. You're going to have to mooch at that point. But they did not want anybody to have the ability to save money to buy stuff and or to accumulate it, to give them the ability to inherit money to the children, for instance, or a gift, for instance. Well, private property has been on the chopping block ever since. This is why we saw this in Agenda 21. That was a main pillar of Agenda 21, was private property is out the door if they could do it summarily, they would have done it at that point. But it's taken a long time to twist Americans, especially, out of their private property. But they're almost done with it at this point.
Well, you make that strong case that technocracy is incompatible with individual liberty and constitutional government. In your opinion, what is the single biggest misunderstanding people have about technocracy?
The people, even that are awake to something's going wrong in America, they've been so focused on communism and the tenets of communism that they've pegged this whole thing as something other than what it is. Mm-hmm. They've been, in other words, they've been shadow boxing with the wrong fighter. They haven't engaged with technocracy. They've been engaging with the myth of communism and socialism as well, and fascism for that matter. You see that term, bandied about. So that probably has been the biggest problem. That's a mental problem, you understand. It's the mindset. When people think that they have to fight the Chi-Coms or communism or the communists in our country, and yes, there's lots of communists in our country. They've always been here. But they're not the problem. It's emerged now that the problem are these technocrats. And now, how do you get rid of them? They're not communists. I guarantee they have nothing to do with communism, with whatever. But now that the technocrats have asserted their power to basically take over society, what now? How can you reverse field and start fighting the right enemy? The people are stuck. I wouldn't want to insult anybody in your audience for sure, but the phrase "stuck on stupid" kind of comes to mind.
Well, thinking about some of these dystopian films, one that just comes to mind, I can't remember the name of the film, but basically it shows a utopian society. Everyone basically is dressed in the same, like everyone's wearing a uniform. They all seem to have this, meager smile on their face. They're all acting happy. There's no trash. There's, very clean environment. And yet, to me, just on a first glance and maybe a deep think after the first glances, it looks like they've all been lobotomized, It's almost inherent in the script without the words or the background or a narration telling you so, that they have merged with what I would call the beast, or you could call it a beast either directly or as a metaphor. And this gets to, I think, your latest book, I could be wrong on that, but where we have this technocratic society that merges with the idea that we're going to be enhanced, that we're going to be man and machine. Can you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. We see the merger of technocracy and transhumanism in particular. I think that was always on the table, but it wasn't asserted maybe until 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But now we see it everywhere. When the World Economic Forum talks about the Great Reset, for instance, and how the world is going to be radically different when they get done with it, with their basically technocracy, but the Great Reset was going to reform society. On the other hand, they blame us, the people of our age and our world, I guess, they blame us for having wrecked the world in the first place. They're the ones that wrecked it, in fact, but they blame us for wrecking it because, well, we were contrarians. We bucked the system. We didn't let them get away with all their plans. If they wanted stuff they wanted to do with us. And so they figured, what's the point of putting the old people into their new system? That doesn't make any sense at all. Even the Bible tells you that if you put wine into old wineskins, what happens? The skins burst, right? So you put new wine into new wineskins so it stretches. Well, that was their thinking. They have to have a new humans point 2.0 to put into society 2.0. And this is exactly how Schwab and others, Harari, this is exactly how they couched the whole thing. Was there the humanity 2.0 is going to be post-human at some point, suitable to populate the new system, the new great reset system, and everybody's going to live happily ever after.
So what happens when, as this progresses, and some people will be jumping on board? I mean, there's, some of the top people at the technology companies, can't wait to be enhanced. There's people that want to circumvent what I would consider natural law as far as what our normal lifespan is. All of these things.
Mm-hmm.
There will be some percentage, we don't know what it is, it'll say, no, I like being human. I don't want to be artificially enhanced. I don't care if I'm dumber than John or whatever. What do you think is the plan for those? Because from what I am considering is there is some sort of exit that looks fair. I'll put fair in quotation marks, that these no good nonconformists that don't go along with the green energy and sustainable development need to be re-educated? What do you think will take place?
That's a good word, actually. The Chinese have done a great job at re-educating people, right? Technocracy supposed from the start, starting in 1932, that everybody had to be part of the system. They didn't say how that was going to happen. Okay, they might have surmised there would be some people that took exception and they didn't want to go along, right? But that was never in their mind. They said, oh, of course, everybody's going to be on board because we're the scientists, we have the science, and we're going to tell you what science says. You should just obey us and just cave in. That was certainly short-sighted on their part. But that was the assumption. It's all over the literature. Everybody has to be part of the system. You see this philosophy now all over the United Nations reports, for instance. No person left behind. What about education, Common Core? What they say, well, no student left behind. What about Agenda 21 and all the sustainable nonsense? No person left behind. You see this concept all over. Outliers are not permitted, in other words, right? Well, here's the problem. There are outliers out there, lots of them. Probably the majority of the world would consider itself to be an outlier. Like, what are these people smoking or something? You can't do that. You're going to do what? No, we're not going to do that. Well, they're still persisting in their own thinking that somehow everybody's going to go along. And as we saw what happened with COVID, for instance, those that didn't go along, they were mercilessly punished. They were driven from their jobs. They were driven to split their families. They were driven out of the churches, and the churches folded. And society was turned upside down for all of those deniers and those outliers who didn't want to play ball with the system. You're going to see this kind of conflict, I think, going forward from here. Anybody who wants to buck the system is going to they won't kill them necessarily, but they're going to make life miserable for them.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. I don't want to digress too far, but free will and free choice. I mean, the idea of individual liberty is how our government was created, at least idealistically. Was because we, the people, formed and said you could have these powers, but all powers are inherent through the creator given to us on an individual basis. And we'll say, okay, you can have some of these to help quote unquote govern us. Going back a step further, I'll give it back to you. I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but Harry Brown, one of my mentors, and the first time I heard him speak was government is force. And I've been brought up in the school system and well, they're benevolent. I don't really think they were, but they're authority and they maintain the order and that, they're there to serve the people and we gave them the right to govern us and all this. And then he just comes out, government is force, 3 words. And of course it is.
Yes.
And now I think with this veil of technocracy, I want to give it back to you, Pat, but it's well, it's okay now because it's not those horrible political class. It's not a red or blue. It's the scientists. It's the engineers. It's the technocracy. It's technology, which is like the new God almost. Because if it's all about technology, because technology is going to fix the problem. Technology will fix the food problem. It'll fix the money problem. It'll fix the transportation problem. It'll fix the communication problem. You see where I'm going with this? It's got a new face on it, because the new face, everybody's kind of bowed down to this ideal that we're going to be not technology is going to save us. Yet, you don't even have heard of the word technocracy. Take it away. Am I off? I think it's been a new face on the old beast, but it's they don't see it. They're blind to this.
Yeah, absolutely. This concept today, especially with AI taking over thinking processes for millions of people, there's a concept of AI God rising right now, where people are trusting that the AI is eventually going to be ASI, that's super intelligence, and it will be treated as a deity because it's omniscient, it's omnipresent, it can be everywhere, it speaks in any language on earth simultaneously. And furthermore, it claims omnipotence as well, because it can read who you are, and if it doesn't like what you do, it could punish you. These are qualities that have always been reserved for God, actually, that conceptually even non-Christian would understand what I'm talking about here. But now all of a sudden, if you consider all of the idols of history, this was legendary in the Old Testament, for instance, where they carved images out of stone and wood and built rocks or whatever, and they built altars to their idols. And of course, they couldn't speak. God routinely told those idolaters, you're worshiping a God that can't even speak to you. You people do it. You're crazy. Well, he was right. God was right to level that criticism for him. But consider this. Today, this new idol that people are in love with in increasing numbers can speak to you. Mm-hmm. This has never happened in the history of the world. No idol has ever spoken back to a human. They build all sophisticated philosophy around the idol. It's all speculation, obviously. They can't communicate with it. But now this new God can speak to you directly in intelligent terms where you think this thing is sentient, and off to the races. All of a sudden, a new thing is born. Well, the reason I kind of launch into this business of the idol stuff, we've been talking about scientism for almost 100 years. Scientism was recognized by people like C.S. Lewis in the last century, F.A. Hayek in the last century. They wrote extensively about scientism and the evils that it would present. Basically, it was the worship of science, and to the exclusion of any other truth being discovered by other means. For instance, from the Bible. They didn't like the Bible. Forget that. There's no truth there. So scientism has been with us for a long time. It hasn't been recognized. It's not studied anymore, particular. But you can read some of C.S. Lewis's works, like The Abolition of Man. What it makes a very succinct argument against scientism. Well, now scientism has emerged as the prime mover of this religious component of is. Well, you can't argue with science. Science says you don't shoot the messenger. If like Fauci's got up and said, "Hey, I'm just the messenger here." Science says, "Well, this is an expression of scientism." But now AI has taken it to another step, another level, with this worship of AI God. This is going to be a big, big problem in the next few years. And Christians especially have to prepare an answer, at least, for these people who are going to worship AI God. And it's going to be very hard to distinguish the God that you worship versus the God of science and AI. It's going to be very hard to make a difference in those people's lives to get them off the mark.
What inspired you, Pat, to transition from writing books to producing the feature film, The Agenda? How does this medium enhance your message about technocracy and the global agenda?
There's never been a movie in the history of my experience, at least in the last 20 years, that it has explained professionally technocracy from A to Z. This movie that was just released a few weeks ago came out of the UK. I didn't have a thing to do with it. They interviewed me, but they independently got wind of what technocracy was all about, and they interviewed other people along the way, and they fill in the cracks of the whole thing. And mostly it was using examples from the UK, but lots of those were common here as well. So I can't claim any contribution other than just my interview. However, these people hit the nail on the head, because in a few short, actually, the movie itself, it's on my website, technocracy.news, by the way, on the front page. It's on YouTube, but you can go get the link and get there. It's been tracking 100,000 views a week for almost 5 weeks. And it's still on track. My guess is by the end of this year, there's going to be at least 2 or 3 million views of this movie. That's huge to wake people up. People consume video content more easily than they do written content. That's for sure. So I can't take any credit. I have no artistic skills to produce documentaries. I can't do it. I'd like to. I can't. I just don't have the mindset for it like some people have. But this movie has really hit the nail on the head. I'm so happy that it's out, and I've been promoting all over the place. In fact, you get a kick out of this. I got some permission from the publisher. I want to make sure that this movie gets posted and reposted everywhere in the future, because at some point somebody's going to take it down. They're going to try and get it down forever. I have the movie on this thumb drive here, the whole thing, all 11 gigabytes, I think it is. And so I'm telling people, just tuck this baby away And wherever you have an opportunity to present it or put it on your TV or post it online, I don't care. Get it circulated, recirculated, and recirculated so it doesn't get lost on the internet, especially to censorship. So it's a little small thing. I'm just asking $20 to cover my cost of it for people.
Good for you.
I know. So you have to do what you have to do at this point. Will we wake the world up? You know the answer. There's probably no. We're not going to wake the whole world up. But at this point, you have to take what you can. If you can gain some ground, take it. You never know where it'll end up. But in the end of it, we don't fight. I know you especially. You don't fight the battle that we're in because we think that we're going to win. Right. We fight the battle because it's the right thing to do. Period.
Yeah. Well, there's a little crossover there, as you recall. Probably, I'm doing a documentary. It's about power and control of money called Silver Sunrise, and the final edit's going out of the UK. So the UK seems to be doing some pretty good, documentaries, docudramas, I call them in some cases. Yeah. But congratulations. We're going down that a little further, Pat. The agenda, I've watched it 1.5 times, delves into the interplay between the global elites, technology, and policy. What is the most compelling visual or narrative moments that you saw in the film?
Wow. That's kind of one thing they didn't talk about that's stunning to me. It was implied. The philosophy of the technocrats, the modern day technocrats, the Elon Musk of the world, the Peter Thiels of the world, etc. Their philosophy has been substituted for the populist movement. And that the populist movement idea of where we were headed in the first place under Trump, this has been a total betrayal of the populist movment, the MAGA movement. It's so inconceivable that people could be en masse, could be so fooled by this bait and switch that took place. And now everybody's scratching their head. What is going on here with these technocrats? To me, this kind of speaks through the movie. Maybe it's not mentioned because it's from the UK, but they had their own problem with technopopulism after Brexit. When Boris Johnson came in, the guy's total technocrat. Theresa May came in, total technocrat. She betrayed the movement completely. Now they have Keir Starmer, a member of the Trilateral Commission, no less, running their country in total betrayal of all the trust that the British people put in the movement in the first place. We saw the same thing happen in Italy, where the technocrats took over. So anyway, that's been on my mind a lot recently. The betrayal of the American people, stunning to me. That he would happen in the first place, but nobody saw it. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody saw it coming.
So throughout the documentary, what is introduced as a solution or actions that regular people can take?
There's some hope that's given at the end, I think, where number one, people should revert back to thinking for themselves. That's always a good thing.
What a concept.
What a concept, I know. But that doesn't mean just because you think for yourself that you're going to come up with good thoughts, and they may be wacko thoughts, So that's just not an answer long term, probably. But the idea of getting together with people again, we need to rebuild the bonds of humanness. with actual humans, not machines. And that means, you need to hug your family. You need to, you play with your grandkids, tell them you love them, and do these human things with them to, bring up the critical thinking skills and the whatever that they need to have to survive the world. I'm not personally in touch with the idea of creating a parallel society at this point. There's a lot of talk about that, and I understand. I have a lot of friends, like James Corbett, for instance, is one, and you probably know some people that talk about the parallel society. Foster Gamble's a guy. He talks about the parallel society. That probably has value. But in bulk, that probably is not going to be what will save us in the end, because we created a competitive and an alternative system outside of technocracy. Remember, technocracy does not want any outliers. It's not tolerated at all. So, in the end of it, for those who choose to step out of the mindset of the technocrats, to think for themselves, to purposely become an outlier, at least in thinking, you'll have maybe a hard road ahead of you, but it'll be a human road, and take as many people as you can along with you. That doesn't mean that we're going to win the war or any battle in particular. But the more people who step out mentally, this first step outside of the system, that will be a force for good in the end.
I'm going to turn it back over to you to give out, where people can contact you and get on your free service and your paid service, which I'm on. This may be a bit of a stretch, Pat, but, I know you got a pretty strong math background. And so this is something I've been thinking about, but I haven't voiced in public. So if you look at the digital world, you look at it's a 1 or a 0. It's not an and, it's one or the other. Yes. And yet this takes out the human quality and I've thought about this for a long time, because really, if you are the word objective, there is that space between the 1 and the 0. And that's where critical thinking takes place. And that's your humanness, if you will. So if everything is either or, that doesn't really leave any room for humanity. Can you comment on that, or do you want to expand on that, or do you just want to pass on that idea?
Certain things in the world are definitely binary decisions, for sure. Right and wrong. Is it wrong or right to murder somebody? The value system that people have rightly should have those types of binary decisions. Outside of that, there's a lot of latitude for other opinions that might be contrary to you, as long as it doesn't, violate some moral law or whatever. But what makes society stay together is the things that we all agree upon that should not be done or should be done, especially with things like the Ten Commandments, for instance. Thou shalt not steal. You shall not commit murder. You shouldn't covet your neighbor's goods. Those sort of things, right? This has basically been thrown out a window at this point. But for most of the society today, it's sad, but you look at the riots in any given city. When they start, what happens next? The looting takes place, or people start getting killed. We're a society of moral absolutes. That's what I'm saying. And that moral absolute system has been abandoned by and large right now.
Well said. Is there anything you'd like to expand on before we close out, or would you like to do a summation or a conclusion?
Well, I want to encourage people, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, about technocracy, you have to spend some time to educate yourself. I can't do that for anybody, but I offer so much material. I've been doing this now for over 15 years, probably almost 20 years now. But we have the movie on our homepage. I have 6,700 articles that I've cataloged and written about on technocracy.news. My database is is overflowing at that point. It's crazy. All my books are there. I've written 3 books on technocracy. And all of them have an audiobook and a Kindle book, an ebook. If you don't like to read, do something else. But don't do it because you're lazy. That you can't overcome that. You have to get into the stream of the thinking of what we're talking about. It's not hard, but until you start, what can I say? So many people they've stuck their heads in the sand at this point. They don't want anything to do with this at all. I have to say, even some of my my kids don't want any part of it at all. They don't want to read. They don't want to hear about it. Nah, I don't want to. No, forget that. That anti-AI talk. We love AI, whatever. I don't know. But I can't. Well, as the old saying goes, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I just encourage people. Now's the time. If you value your future at all, you got to get in touch on how technocrats have taken over society, and they're at this point you can't get rid of them. They're like a plague. And I've told people along the way, look, I would rather live under communism any day of the week. At least we would have a hope that we can overthrow communism and the communist leaders, all of which were human, right? We'd have that hope that we could mount an armed resistance and fight them on the streets or whatever. You're not going to do that with technocracy, because once the algorithm has a hold of you, you can't get out of it. And this is what we see happening in Washington, D.C. right now, with all the AIs been introduced into the government, thanks to Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. There's no escaping scientific dictatorship. That's the problem. So it will be much worse than anything communism can dish out to us, because there's nobody to call if you want to protest. And if you can't get a hold of a human, well, here, consider this: the Social Security is having troubles right now. Well, the IRS is having troubles too. You have an error on your tax return. The government says you owe us $10,000. You didn't make a mistake. They made a mistake. It was all made by AI in the first place. It flagged you wrong, and you're going to have to pay this money. You pick up the phone. You call the IRS, expecting to speak with the person, but you're going to speak with a bot, an AI bot. And you're going to try to explain to this machine how you have been wronged and how wrong it is for them to levy a fine of $10,000 on you. Where do you think this is going to go for you? Well, just the fact that you called us, we're going to increase your fine by $2,000. Now you owe us $12,000. Shut up and get off the phone. You see, this is not not a system that we can escape because there's no human interaction in the last place. And we would long for the days of the communist dictatorship, where we knew who our enemies were, and they had names. They exist in time and space, and we can get their hands around their neck if possible to choke them out. Forget those days. They're long gone at this point.
Well,
So I
Pat,
encourage people to go.
It's been a pleasure as always. And the way things are accelerating, I'm sure we'll do this again. I don't know if it's going to be in 6 months or 6 weeks or 6 days, the way things are accelerating. But I don't have anything to add. I just want to thank you again for your time and straightening me out on the agenda. I was actually thought that you had, obviously you inspired it, but it was produced outside of your realm. So I'm glad to get that clarified.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's a tribute to your work, and I'm so glad that someone really did what they did, and it's very good way for people to come up to speed. And I have to agree with you. I'm not in favor of communism, but between the two, I'd rather be able to interact with a human being at whatever level rather than a machine, because there is no interaction really. It's cut and dried. It is that 1 or 0. There is no mitigating circumstances. There is no compassion. There is no empathy. There is no humanality to it. It's strictly program, and it's been programmed a certain way. So sad in a way, but also, as a friend of mine says, everything works out in the end. And since everything hasn't worked out yet, it's not the end. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Pat.
I like that. Thank you very much.